Welcome everyone to Classic Movie Matinee, where I will have a guest each week, introduce them to a classic they've never seen, and at the end of it all, ask the big question: Is this movie a classic? And did they enjoy it? My name is Johnny. I'm one of the co-hosts of Film Lovers Guide to the Galaxy, and today we are joined with the mod with the most. It's Steven from Steven's Corner. Steven, how are we doing today?
Oh, yeah, no, it's great. Thanks for having me. And this has been it's a great experience. Again, long time Galaxy Brain, second time contributor because I contributed in the 2021 best ofs.
Yes. I'm very glad you're here for the premiere episode. And the movie we're going to be talking about is a movie musical that everyone has. Cinephiles, even AFI has their top 100 or movie musical list. Their number one there. It's 1952 Singin' in the Rain, who stars Gene Kelly, Debbie Reynolds, Donald O'Connor.
Singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. What a glorious feeling, we're happy again.
Before we get through all that, I wanted to ask, like, for me, classic movies are something that I love enjoying to watch. There's an appreciation of art that comes to it. I like seeing movies that were made before we got into the technology that we have now, especially when it's with film rather than going digital, seeing the prop sets, using different aspects that they don't have like we have now. Some people hate watching classics. Someone like other co-host Joe hates the idea of going back to watching a black and white movie because, hey, that's back in the old times, stuff like that they don't want to kind of look back on. But to me, it's like going back, looking at history of movies sometimes helps see the things that directors, actors have been influenced on, and we can see with new movies that are today. So I wanted to ask, like, what are your thoughts on classical movies or movies that we consider classics to this day?
Well, classic movies are an integral part of the film going experience. I mean, they've helped lay the groundwork, as you mentioned, lay the groundwork with some of the techniques that get us to where we are now. It helps when you get certain filmmakers like Quentin Tarantino or Christopher Nolan that will do references back to the older movies to sort of go like, hey, we were lifted on the shoulders of giants kind of thing. Like, if you, from this movie with Singing in the Rain, like, you get some of those long shots, like, because that's the thing. Like, back then, you just did those long shots because you knew everything you're doing. If you don't have that kind of thing, you maybe don't see 1917 or some of your other long tracking shots where all this stuff has to go right. I mean, and with all that all comes back from the play experience, and where you don't have those other shots. You got one shot at this,
Yeah.
and if it goes poorly, you can't necessarily dub other people over like it's done in this movie. Like, you go with what it is.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it great. They can't, like you said, like, it's not like you can do like 100 takes, even though Stanley Kubrick did a lot of that stuff, right? But it's hard back in the 50s, especially. It's like you're so finite with what you have that, like, you gotta kind of nail it when the cameras start rolling. One question I had is, what, we consider a lot of things a classic, but what in your eyes makes a movie considered to be a classic?
Classic. I mean, I'd say anything that's got a long-lasting legacy, like that. Certain movies that, like, maybe didn't even need to see in order to know, that's in the lexicon. Your Wizard of Oz, your Citizen Kane, your Casablanca, your Rashomon, your Seven Samurai,
Mm-hmm.
that, a Forbidden Fortress, that help lead to something like Star Wars or Rocky Horror or all these other, Young Frankenstein, like all these other ones that, like, that's the thing. It's, where do you draw your line at classics? What are we, it's your difference between the TCM and AMC.
Yeah.
Like, your TCMs are, like, again, Gone with the Wind or Key Largo, or maybe, I guess, if we're technically considering, like, or Vertigo, a lot of Hitchcock in Britain before he comes to America. But again, you and I both being sports guys, sometimes there are instant classics.
Yes.
Like,
So
I'd argue Arrival or Get Out, ones
yeah.
that will, like, stand the test of time because they're a flash pen at the moment, but they are also, like, something that will get tossed out in some random montage in 15 years on the Oscars where it's like, oh right, I enjoyed that movie. I remember that.
I think I agree with you. Like we have our instant classics that will have some legs going into the years, but classic to me has to be like 20 years minimum out. It has to still be in the world, whether it's a reference or an influence. And I think picking a movie like Singing in the Rain is great because people love musicals. The theme song, the main song to this movie is still something that people kind of use to this day. Like, yeah, the Pittsburgh Pirates, every time there's a rain delay, they still play Singing in the Rain, which I think is pretty funny to do. So,
well, I mean, Gene Kelly's like a native son of Pittsburgh, so
Exactly.
you're going to go for it. It's almost like, it's like why the Yankees use New York, New York kind of thing.
Before we get into the movie, I wanted to ask, so this is a movie you haven't seen.
No.
I guess the question is twofold. One, why haven't you? And two, what were some preconceived notions you had with this movie before you even started watching it?
So one of the reasons I had held off on it until you had asked me to see this was, I'm going to use other terms to make this awkward there. One of the reasons I hadn't is I didn't really think there was going to be much of a plot to it. Like, because there's a thing that, to use an older term on this, like Disney at one point did package films. It's like you just kind of jammed your stuff together, and there wasn't necessarily. It was just. I mean, it was kind of a montagey kind of just slapdash things together. And I'd remembered reading like, oh, that's a thing. So I'm like, oh, well, how is this going to hang together?
Yeah.
This isn't like a jukebox musical. It's not like Mamma Mia, or I was actually worried that it would be more like Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again, rather than Mamma Mia. Where allegedly the story for Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again, those songs, the directors or the screenwriters just put a whole bunch of ABBA songs on and literally threw darts, and whichever ones they landed on, they used.
Yeah.
Like, how are you going to be able to string that together? And I had also had some, I guess, lofty goals or whatever. I want to say 2010. At one point, Joseph Gordon-Levitt was a guest host on SNL.
Yeah.
In his monologue, he does the entire make 'em laugh sequence. Like, he builds sets. He goes, well, he doesn't build sets. He'll say, I'll do this. He practices. It's just the whole thing. And it's like, why the hell are you doing this? Like, why? But yeah, that was the thing. But it was the sense like, yeah, mainly it was, I wasn't sure whether it could hang together.
Yeah.
And, it's like, oh, it's always on the list. And, thinking like Citizen Kane or others, like, okay, I can get through having not seen this.
Yeah. I'm glad this is the first movie we get into. I would be remiss to tell you, I remember the first time I saw this movie, it was in 2009. I was working at Hollywood Video. I have yet, we have different aisles, and I'm like looking through these DVDs, and I was like, shit, it's raining outside. Let me go home and rent this movie. And I've always heard the song, but I've never watched through the movie. And what we get is something that I think is pure movie magic that I wasn't really expecting. Right? It's most musicals, like this one. It's also a romantic comedy. Basically, the premise of the movie is that we have Don Lockwood, played by Gene Kelly, with his budding star Lena Lamont, played by Gene Hagen, who is going through with the studios a transition time from the silent pictures to talkies and making that transition from one to another. I love the beginning of the movie. I think it is really smart to frame it as a movie premiere. So that way we get introduced to the characters, how we get introduced to Don Lockwood, what he does, how he got discovered.
Come a long way together, Don. Won't you tell us how it all happened?
Well, Lena and I have made a number of pictures together.
Oh, no, Don, I want your story from the beginning.
Well, Dora, not in front of all these people.
I had a smile on my face watching the whole sequence, but I really didn't laugh. And I remember laughing out loud pretty hard, and I still do when I watch it. Is like the minute Lena speaks for the first time.
What's wrong with the way I talk? What's the big idea? Am I dumb or something?
And I just couldn't. It is so funny. it's just like I'm just like, because you throughout that whole time where she's next to him with the press conference, you can see her leaning into the mic, but he
Yeah.
keeps stopping her. And I thought, watching it for the first time, how did you feel, or were you expecting that voice when you heard her for the first time?
With a lot of these things, no, but yes, because initially no, but as soon as she did have the more Brooklyn accent, I'm like, oh, right. Singing in the Rain is one of those trope setters.
Yeah.
Like, there's various things. Well, or I guess the sense of, like, just like the idea, technically the jazz singer may not have been the first one to actually fully sync it with, audio with video, but it's the one that we know is the one that did it. And so, but no, like, that was the thing. And then I sort of a theme throughout this is I'm sort of trying to view this from a 21st century lens. It's like, okay, what holds up, what doesn't? Some of these things have sort of the struggle of what's a woman's place within the Hollywood system, transition between technology. That's eternal. Some of the other things, which we might get into a bit, don't hold up all that well.
And so we go after the movie's premiered, see Don Lockwood trying to escape his fans, and then he ends up with the car with Kathy Selden, who is played by Debbie Reynolds. She's a person that's like, hey, movie stars are nothing. All they do is mimic and overexpress. And I thought she was really damn good in that car scene. That was pretty funny.
Oh, you can laugh if you want to, but at least the stage is a dignified profession. And what have you got to be so conceited about? You're nothing but a shadow on film. A shadow. You're not flesh and blood.
He's getting mad, but I think it's, you see in the later scene, he's feeling very insecure. It's like, oh, what? Like, yeah, you're not acting. You're just, pantomiming pretty much, And so they get to this party, and then, RF, who's the head of the studio, kind of shows up and talks about the talking picture, and, people laughing it off, being like, it's never gonna pick up because this jazz singer's movie, like, it's gonna do anything. And then we get our first really big dance sequence or musical sequence, which is All I Do Is Dream of You. The girls are at the party kind of singing and dreaming. So, you talked a little bit about the musical sequences in here. What did you really think about? What are some of your favorites or not so favorites in this movie?
I watched it on DVD and then got some of the behind the scenes documentary stuff on there. One thing that shows up that I kind of missed the first time in that sequence you just mentioned is, so you have Debbie Reynolds, who's all of 19 at the time. Her first on-screen performance. She had done plays and some of the other stuff, and thing I learned and was fascinated to learn, Debbie Reynolds was a gymnast going into that. So she wasn't like classically trained, but she knew how to handle herself, which made that impressive. And but that first sequence, a streamer like falls on her face. So she's still doing moves with a streamer on her face, but cool, like the other side of the pillow, plucks it off at one point, then gives like a side eye, like, okay, we got to just keep going and sing and dance and go through. Like, that I enjoyed. Later on in the movie, we get, I'm trying to think, what was it? It was the Broadway, Gene Kelly's pitching this one scene, like Broadway Carol.
Broadway Melody. That's what
Broadway Melody, yeah.
Yes.
There were parts in that I'm like, okay, oh, right. I saw this was a version that got covered in Hail Caesar, the Coen's movie. But kind of like with the bar. But then you get to the part, albeit an amazing scene, or amazing part of the montage with the scarf and the dance and, she showing off her gymnast style. You had referenced me as the mod with the most. Like, at some point, the scenes go on so long, I feel like I'm a mod again, going like, okay, what's our next cue? Where are we going on this?
Yeah.
When are we cutting this off? And it's like, I get it. It's almost, in a way, like a Family Guy joke. You're there, but it's almost like not far, almost at that point, you're like, oh crap, can we get this done? But then it goes over, like, oh no, they're still going with this. They have enough stamina to keep this going for an unbroken shot for at least 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That's their, the classic Singing in the Rain, the titular song on that, which surprisingly went through like 3 times. The intro, the outro, and sort of in the middle. Like, that's one of the most classic scenes in cinema on that, of him dancing, him going through that. And that was another thing, I guess, through all this, I'm realizing throughout the whole, I'm like, oh, there's a lot of ADR in this. Like, you have to go through this. And go through the voices on these, because there's no way you're getting any. He's not singing live on this, or if he is, they have to dub that over because you were otherwise hearing the puddles, you're hearing everything on that.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't seen at this point Spielberg's West Side Story, but one of the things I had heard through that is the love of puddles.
Yeah, there's.
And that's, again, if nothing else, a tribute to this film. Trying to think which other ones. Yeah, I mean, for the most part, like, it's there, it hits, you see what you're doing with that. It's some of them, again, Broadway melody works to a point, then it's off, then it's there. And Make 'Em Laugh, as covered by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, like, okay, there's that. And I'm like, it's like, there's the thing that, you'll say with being around stand-ups, you're like, that's funny, or it's good. And you were saying with classic movies, you're like, I know this is good.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not necessarily amazed by it because it's been done to death, but I appreciate the effort you put into it.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, actually, but one of the probably the more impressive number is from that beginning montage where they're dancing with the fiddles in their podunk. I believe, what is it? Because I wrote it down because it's amazing. Coyoteville, New Mexico. Like, the towns they are dragging themselves through: Dead Man's Fang, Arizona; Oatmeal, Nebraska; and Coyoteville, New Mexico. Yeah. But the fact that they are able to sing and dance while still be bent over, playing a fiddle and going through that, you're like, such great conditioning. So that, I guess, overall, the numbers I enjoy, I enjoyed the craftsmanship if I didn't necessarily enjoy the melodies to it.
I would tell you, sticking with like the musical numbers, I think Make 'Em Laugh to me is like, the song is fine. I enjoyed it. I enjoy the physicality of that number. And then when you read how, like, this guy had to get bed rest, that he was trying so hard that, like, Donald O'Connor, like, from all intents and purposes, from what I read, is like, he really should have died when he was filming Make 'Em Laugh, just because of the physical exertion that he's putting out in that role. The physicality of it, I thought, was absolutely great. Good Morning it's just, I love that this movie takes long takes. Some people, when I say long takes, you guys, I'm saying that it doesn't have to be 5-6 minutes long. Like, that's kind of crazy sometimes. What I'm saying is that it's long enough for you to actually get immersed into that scene and not realizing that things are getting cut and cut and cut because they're either hiding something or they're building something. And so the Good Morning scene is really good to me, and we'll get this to here, is the actual part where he does start singing in the Rain. I've heard this song before the movie. I think everyone has. But when you watch it in the movie in its context, and when it happens, which is, they figure out, like, okay, this is what we can do. This is how we could hide Lena Lamont's voice. We do the dubbing. She kisses him for the first time, kisses Don Lockwood for the first time, and he's happy about it. He drops her off, and then the song comes up, and you can just feel the pure joy. Don Lockwood now has someone that he is falling in love with. He now has a career where he believes he can be saved, and he's doing all this. Doesn't matter if it's raining. He's enjoying it. The sequences that Gene Kelly does, just the dancing alone, it's like every time I watched it about like an hour before we got onto this podcast to record it. I just, every time I watch it, I light up because it's just so magical for me just to watch Gene Kelly do his thing on there. And I've seen imitation, right? I love Usher. Grew up listening to Usher. He did a rendition of it during I don't know if it's the Grammys or whatnot, and it was fine, but it just isn't the same. Like, there's something what Gene Kelly does and the movements that he does within that specific thing, and knowing that he had a fever during this whole time doing it too, which is just crazy to me. Like, there's a lot of things happening in this movie with the history of it, but I thought that scene alone, the minute I saw that scene, and I remember watching, and I was all like, man, this movie's good. I really enjoy this. I really enjoy it. And then usually when it comes to great movies or movies that become a classic, there's usually one scene, one sequence that where it'll push it over the top, where you're just saying, hey, oh shit, this is great. Now, I'm watching something that is very special. And after that sequence, I was like, crazy, man. Like, I love it. I don't know what your thoughts is with that scene specifically.
That's one of those. So I mentioned before, I watched sort of some documentaries or those that were inspired by it. I believe Usher even pops up in there. Paula Abdul also just tremendously goes, and she mentions that same thing you're having. You don't do the cuts. One of the things that actually came to mind from that, because while watching it, then as you were describing it now, was 500 Days of Summer, the You Make My Dreams Come True sequence. And I think that's a similar point with that, where it's like he's going through that type of moment, like, hey, he's had this, and he's able to explode over that. And I think, as you're saying from that, like, that is, again, like, that's his highlight. Like, that's the thing you could have put in for his Oscar reel. But doing some side research, he doesn't get nominated for this. This movie only got 2 Oscar nominations that year.
Yeah.
What's wild is one of their nominations was for supporting actress against the 52 remake of The Jazz Singer. That doesn't win either, but that's not the point. It's just weird that of all things, a movie that makes, has The Jazz Singer as a side component, also is remade that same year.
You couldn't write it better than itself.
Yeah, Hollywood is fun.
So we talk about the musical numbers. Are there any other scenes that stand out to you that you think is good? For me, I think some of the best scenes are them filming a talkie for the first time. I think that some of those sequences are really funny.
Lena, we're missing every other word. You've got to talk into the mic.
Well, I can't make love to a bush.
Especially with Lena doing her sweeping motion, and it's like the mic is there, but the mic doesn't catch it because, it's like she's moving her head back and forth. I always thought that was hilarious to watch.
That's also the concern I have during this recording with having a headset. It's like, this is why I have a headset and not a microphone. I'm always worried about swinging around from that. Yeah, no, I forgot. One of the parts I did enjoy from that Broadway melody was, again, that maze or dance sequence that I already referenced to Hail Caesar. In a way, also reminded me of the rave scene from The Matrix Reloaded. So it's like with so much just there and chaos and color. It's almost like it's that meets. You take that rave scene but the color aesthetic of like Schumacher Batman, but with like Scott Jopp, but with like 40s music, like but with Broadway, like a vaudeville music. Like that was easily an amazing part on that. Of course, also we'll probably get to the ending scene set up on that, and it's just that of just the setup. Like, oh no, let's let this play out. Don't interrupt. Just let it play out. Let it play out. Maybe reminded me of some other recently overconfident stars that thought they were able to just do things, and they thought, oh, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to share certain things with the media. This'll, I'm the real star of this.
The crescendo of this movie becomes where after he pitches it to RF, and RF's like, yeah, let's do this, but we can't tell Lena that they're going to dub her voice with Kathy. Lena finds out she has one of the great lines, one of the movie quotes of all time. Oh, not all time, but I thought it was funny. And
well, I make more money than Calvin Coolidge put together.
When she said it, I thought that was real. Like, this movie, it's a musical first and foremost. I get that, but there's so many good small things that just make me absolutely laugh. Jean Hagen, who plays Lena Lamont, to me is the unsung hero of this movie. Like, she didn't sing. She's the funny one that gets picked on. That has the voice, but without her, this movie really doesn't, like, the comedy component just doesn't work without her.
No, but again, to use the wrestling term, she's kind of the heel you need at this point.
Yep.
She's the one you need for the conflict, and the one that needs to cause, be the one that drives it forward. And, honestly, that's another thing I'm realizing, like, oh, this actually kind of has, like, a WWE, like, plot line where at one point she, Rita Moreno, in her small role, goes on to do, win an Oscar for West Side Story, plays Zelda, Lena's confidant, who points out that they were doing this. So Lena goes to the studio, goes to RF, and pulls out the contract. She drops language, like paragraph 4, subsection C, that she gets to control her publicity. So she takes control of the narrative. It's a complete boss move. And it's like, yeah, she is not, you're like, you're right. They signed that in the contract. They thought she was so dumb she would never enforce the ability to control her own press.
It's so we get like to me, I Gene Hagen, that it is so great. And so we get to the end, she basically is forcing them to use Kathy the whole time, and then we get this whole sequence of her taking her own control, which becomes her demise, because then the whole crowd realizes that she's been getting dubbed this whole time. And then they get to celebrate that, hey, this is your real star here. You guys might like the stuff on screen, but you fall in love with this voice. This is the voice. And so the movie kind of crescendos and ends. We talked about things that we really enjoyed about the movie. What are things that you didn't like, or like you said before, like might not hold up to people that might start watching this movie for the very first time now?
There's a very brief part. So like in between. So after, Debbie Reynolds' character Kathy gets fired from the dance agency, or the dance agency she's with, because Lena knew Don was jealous, or she was jealous of Don being smitten of Kathy. And so she's doing other stuff with her pictures. And I think it's a beautiful girl montage. There's a scene where someone's just in blackface, and they're supposed to be like a tribal person. I'm like, oh, yeah, it's a blink and you miss it. But you're like, yeah, no, that's no, very bad. No good, very bad, don't do it. It's still a miracle that Robert Downey Jr. was able to do that and make it enough of a joke and get an Oscar nomination for that in Tropic Thunder.
I think me and Joe and Jared have had this discussion a lot with Tropic Thunder. I think that part, that I feel like that will be the last time that anyone ever can do it. That being said, that was really funny, and I don't think they did it really tastefully, isn't the right word.
Part of the
but
joke,
the joke, it makes sense with it. So,
and it's the fact it's making fun of Hollywood, and one can argue that's the latest attempt at trying to get Robert Downey Jr. an Oscar anyway, with the whole thing of makeup Oscars, which has been covered to death by any movie podcast. We don't need to get into it. No one's seen Harry and Tonto. Sorry, that's still just going to be a thing. No one will ever know what the hell Harry and Tonto is.
But yeah, what else? Anything other?
Again, previously stated during the Broadway Melody, just certain dance scenes that go on too long and that don't necessarily wrap around. Something I was expecting that I was glad to be proven wrong with was, as you actually mentioned at the very beginning, like I'm not really a big fan of frame stories, or what I call, thanks to TV tropes, how we got here stories. Some try and call them in medias res. Like, no, that's not in medias res. In medias res is you start and you eventually get stuff. This isn't a, hey, we're a 2000s TV drama, we have a cold open, we have this, and then we just jump back 48 hours because they're in danger. No, that's just lazy storytelling. You don't trust your intro at that point. Yeah. This was them like, oh, are we going to just spend the whole movie going back through how we got to this premiere? No, we got to where they got to that moment, but that was their career in the premieres. So then we go forward from there. I'm like, I enjoyed that. That could have worked in a Broadway musical, sort of thing, but it's like, no. There was enough of a plot, but I'm trying to think, even the Broadway Melody, part of it, you're just like, oh no, they are just shuffling in some other songs on this, or even the montage. Like, a song, they have a bunch of costumes that I think might have been used from Yankee Doodle Dandy.
Yeah. So that's one of the things, right? Yeah, they've been using a lot of different props and sets that, like, they're just throwing in with this movie. From what I read, the music itself is all music written from like Arthur Freed, but it wasn't specifically for this movie. It's just a collection of stuff. They just, like you said,
a couple songs.
They kind of pieced it together. Make Me Laugh was one of them, but I heard it was kind of a ripoff from Be Like a Clown or something like that.
Yeah.
You got it. So his only original song that was for this movie technically was a ripoff of a different song that was in a different from a different movie, which I thought was kind of funny in the history of this movie. Those are really valid points. Like some of those sequences, especially, were crazy because the high tempo music in this movie is really good.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think when it comes to some of the ballads, it just depends on, they can run a little bit longer, so I understand that.
But in a way, it's similar to, but having been involved with musicals through high school and college, like, it's, at the same time, I respect that, because it is, like, you need those slower ones to sort of let everyone catch their breath and solve the plot. It's not just this isn't Crank the Musical. Like, you need some ones to slow it down. And, yeah, that, take that as a thing. That's the fun part of Hollywood. You can have the idea of something as crazy as Crank the Musical, and maybe that gets a Tony at some point. We don't know.
Hollywood. I know you guys are clamoring to listen to this podcast. If you make Crank the Musical and Jason Statham is your lead in this musical, I will pay top dollar to watch this.
Same.
It would be so good.
I'm almost trying to think, like, just, even though I don't think it would fit, I don't think he's done a musical yet, but for whatever reason, the name that comes to my mind is Ang Lee. I want a high frame rate Ang Lee Crank the Musical.
Oh my god. He's going to push technology into it. So
yeah,
that would be good.
Yeah, I want to see paddles sparking at 128 frames a second.
That'd be so good. You're right. I would pay top dollar for that. So,
and 40X, get
yeah.
Rumble. you get the Jones with him.
So I'll read you guys through some of the highlights why this movie is considered kind of a classic, right? AFI, when they did the 100 Years, 100 Movies, in terms of the movie musicals, they ranked it number 1. Their 100 Years, 100 Movies list with all the genres, they finished number 5. Like, think about this, you guys. Like, they honestly, only Citizen Kane, Godfather, Casablanca, and Raging Bull are the 4 movies ahead of this movie in their AFI list. Yes, this list is from 2007. When they update it again, which they will at some point, we'll see where that kind of ranks in. In 2004, AFI did 100 Years, 100 Songs. 3 songs from this movie made their top 100. Good Morning finished at 72. Make 'Em Laugh at 49. And Singin' in the Rain at number 3, which is crazy to think about. Sight and Sound did their list again for 2022. This movie was number 10. It is by far the highest musical that's made up there, which is crazy to think about. In 1989, when the National Film Registry started for the first time, and these guys, you'll see it, they pick movies that they deem culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant by the U.S. Library of Congress, and they are selected for preservation. Singin' in the Rain was the first 25 films. It was among the first 25 films chosen. So started new, and they were one of the first 25 that get chosen. That's like being in the first round of a NFL, NBA draft and being drafted within that first round. That's how highly respected, at least in the U.S., it is. One of the segments I'll do as we do this is that, to me, the greatest critic ever, Roger Ebert. I'll read a couple of his excerpts on movies that we cover. So this is his rewriting in 2000 for Singin' in the Rain. I'll give you a small excerpt. Here's what he wrote. There is no movie musical more fun than Singin' in the Rain, and few that remain as fresh over the years. Its originality is all the more startling if you reflect that only one of its songs was written new for the film, that the producers plundered MGM's storage vaults for sets and props, and that the movie was originally ranked below An American in Paris, which won a Best Picture Oscar. The verdict of the years knows better than an Oscar. Singin' in the Rain is a transcendent experience, and no one who loves movies can afford to miss it. One of this movie's pleasures is that it's really about something. Of course, it's about romance, as most musicals are, but it's also about the film industry in a period of dangerous transition. The movie simplifies the changeover from silence to talkies, but doesn't falsify it. Yes, cameras were housed in soundproof booths, and microphones were hidden almost in plain view. And yes, preview audiences did laugh when they first heard the voices of some famous stars. Garbled talks, the ads promised, but her co-star, John Gilbert, would have been better off keeping his mouth shut. The movie opens and closes as sneak previews, has sequences on sound stages and in dubbing studios, and kids the way the studios manufactured romances between their stars. The magic of Singing in the Rain lives on, but the Hollywood musical didn't learn from its example. Instead of original made for the movie musicals like this one, An American in Paris and The Bandwagon, Hollywood started recycling pre-sold Broadway hits. That didn't work because Broadway was aiming for an older audience. Many of its hits were showcases for ageless female legends. Most of the good modern musicals have drawn directly from new music, as A Hard Day's Night, Saturday Night Fever, and Pink Floyd The Wall did. Meanwhile, Singing in the Rain remains one of the few movies to live up to its advertising. What a glorious feeling, the poster said. It was the simple truth. I'm always going to read Roger Ebert, you guys, because this man, like, I went into school wanting to try to be a movie critic. This guy is the one guy that, I love reading. I don't necessarily agree with all of his reviews, but I love the way he writes because it's very personal. Like, I know he knows more about movies than 99% of America when he was alive. But he made it, when he wrote things, he made it sound like you get excited about the movie, whether you like it or not. And he brings that in. So I'm always going to read, and I think this will be a good segment I always have with these movies. But, to his point, though, this type of musical, outside of La La Land, because, if I would have asked this question before La La Land was made, I would have told you, I don't think a musical like this specifically can be made in this current era of movies that people like to watch. Do you think musicals like Singing in the Rain have a place within the future cinema with future audiences?
Oh, no, for sure. But there's always going to be room for musicals and ones that just, you go all out. Now, albeit this might have been cut heavy, I've not seen it in a while. A movie that I'm definitely going to bat for as just a fun time is Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again, which, again, seriously, you don't need to have seen the first one. It has, the lowest stakes possible. Oh no, the hotel we're going to have on this Greek island the grand opening is going to get ruined because of rain, a storm and some other stuff there. You have Cher. You've got Cher having the choice of anyone she could have to play a interest, and she picks Andy Garcia.
Right, yeah.
You get Pierce Brosnan from the first movie. People didn't like how he sang, so he gets a smaller version. You have a Godfather 2 type movie as well in this. It is there's that. I mean, other versions like the Pitch Perfect trilogy, which again diminishing returns, but there's always going to be these kinds of somewhat original ones that convey to the experience, and that even if they aren't original, they will go through that. And the various TV shows that have done musicals, Buffy or Scrubs or various other ones, and some will work well if you're written to it. Avenue Q has so many other problems. It's probably never going to get a movie adaptation. The Gary Coleman estate might also have some words about that. But no, there will always be room for that. And as you said, with La La Land, there's going to be something getting brought up there. And while we're in an era worldwide where we kind of have that sense of nostalgia, we might see some of those. How we might see a Cabaret remake in the next couple of years. We don't know. Maybe someone gets desperate and wants to make the musical that Jason Segel's character is doing in I Love You, Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
I would pay top dollar to see that Dracula musical.
Again, getting a double feature of Crank the musical and the Dracula musical. I hate the idea we are eventually doing a segment, but I almost feel like this has to become a thing where someone has to, whether you or a guest, proposes some outlandish, if not musical, some outlandish remake of something that does not, making something extremely high class or something extremely low class.
Yeah. High art, low art. That's what it is.
Yes. Making your own classic, but definitely there's always going to be a place for it. There's always going to be waves. There's going to be questionable decisions, but yeah, there's always room for that, because I forgot who had this, and this is me from just not having written this down. One of the concepts towards musicals is you sing when you can't, singing is when it's the only natural step. when you can't express it in any other way, be it emotion, be it otherwise, of like, that's just where you are. And that's the whole thing with Tonight from West Side Story, to keep that getting referenced. Like, you have those moments, that sense of first love, and just going through that, or with America, of being able to have questionable choices towards how people pick things and where do you fit in the country. But yeah, there's always going to be room for that, and it's a good thing to fall back on. That every so often we're going to have a musical. Well, maybe not. I mean, but yeah, La La Land revives it, because like Rock of Ages kind of killed it for a bit.
Rock of Ages and Hairspray back to back.
I mean, but I think we'll see with the notes or others. But I think Hairspray actually did somewhat decently. But that was also like, it didn't necessarily need to, because that was a filmed adaptation of a musical based off of adapting a dramatic play, a dramatic movie. Like, that was an earlier Waters movie that was just a dramatic version that then got adapted into the musical, which then got readapted into the thing. It's like, but I mean, again, you might get something like Mamma Mia, where they're going to adapt it. Like, maybe with Disney Plus, that might have killed the sense of doing a staged version of Hamilton. But I mean, hell, 1776 happened too. So, like, who knows?
Your preconceived notions before you saw this movie, and then now after you've seen it, give me your final thoughts on what you think.
So, sort of like, to use the parlance, like, getting pulled aside and sort of like getting your cinema score, if you will, to get pulled aside. Like, this is definitely a classic on this. Like, I am glad I saw this movie. It was great to put context to the classic moments. It's a movie that is greater than the sum of its parts, as clearly is evidenced. Like, it's a lot of, use the high class and oil class. It's a musical built out of a box of scrap pages. They built this in essentially the 40s equivalent of or 50s equivalent of a man cave. They built a musical out of a box of scraps in a writer's cave, and it set a standard that, again, is still being made today. From even to La La Land, it gets you La La Land, gets you High School Musical, it gets you Opposites Attract. I'm
glad that this is the first movie we get to see. It's something that I tend to watch once a year. I'm glad I got to see it towards the end here. I used to think West Side Story was the better musical, but Singing in the Rain had the best musical sequence ever to me. But as years go by and I, rewatch some of these things from time to time, I just, I agree. Like, I think Singing in the Rain is, to me, the best musical that's ever made, partly due to the songs are pretty timeless. Even Moses Supposes, which is fourth on it. It's just a great song. And because you remember the visuals when you watch the movie. The takes on the dance sequences are great. The comedy just lands. To me, it is, I was smiling. I was, I have this smile in my head. I'm like, okay, this is pretty hee funny. And then the minute Lena talks, it becomes haha. And then I'm like, okay, this is the movie I'm getting. And, you sprinkle the great musical numbers in it. That's what makes this movie like stand above and shoulders a great classic.
Yeah, definitely. That was reminding me another thing I had forgotten through, like that. But her voice, that was the thing that actually clicked for me. Another thing, sort of through line, is her voice reminds me a lot of Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn.
Oh yeah, I can hear it when she's talking. Yeah.
Now I kind of want to maybe dabble with some editing and maybe have that sense of like layering in certain lines there. How will that work? But you're definitely right. The physical acting, from the very scenes where they are trying to put the lav mic on Lena, and at one point a guy wanders on set and is like, "Why is this cable here?" Pulls it and just knocks her over, and it's like that's another reason why it works. It's a satire. It's almost like it's already a satire of the film industry at that time.
It's a good thing for people to watch and kind of understand. Like, you got the musical component, but like I'll harp on again, it's like the comedy works, but everything is set up. Like the set off pays off, and that's when you get the punchline. That's when everything lands, and it did that in spades in this movie.
And that's why that works. Because almost not going with that, but that's the critical component, because Singin' in the Rain had co-directors of Kelly and Donen, and so it helps the idea of having the actor as well, having that actor perspective. Like, hey, here's what I know I can do to push this, and it's like we're not just dancing for dancing's sake. We're finding choreography that tells the story, that moves it forward. Like, you make this a lean 103 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, it is in, it is out. It doesn't, I mean, yes, as I've mentioned, it lingers at times, but it's like, it's a musical. It's gonna have some extra fat. You know, you're gonna have some Curry flourishes. Like, yeah, every game or so, Curry's just gonna take a 48-footer because he can.
Yeah.
Like, it's there. It's a classic. And that's the thing. Classic movies are not perfect. Not always perfect movies.
There's no such thing as a perfect movie. As much as I love, if you guys listen to me, I have an affinity for Back to the Future. Even I know that's not a perfect movie. It is the closest thing to a perfect movie, but it's not perfect. I get that. So
a perfect movie wouldn't have the potential incest subplot on there. Like, that's a thing. Like, but that's the exact point of that. Like, you have those things that tie it together. It's a tight screenplay. You have setup, payoff, setup, payoff, setup, payoff. There's so much. We can go on for so many other things, but that's like, we can go on with Zemeckis and so many other ones. Like, actually, briefly from that, I will say, because there is another moment. So that whole escape scene that Gene Kelly has actually reminded me of Zemeckis' first film, which was I Want to Hold Your Hand, which is a story of, it's a straightforward one. It's like, it's four girls that are trying to get to the Beatles performance of Ed Sullivan. And it's like, it is, like, it's there. You can see a lot of the groundwork Zemeckis has, but that's the thing with this. I wouldn't call it a classic, but it's also a thing but that's the thing with this. It's the appreciation of film and movies, which is what helps make things a classic. It's you can respect it, and you acknowledge what came before you while pushing things forward.
You guys, I really hope you guys give Singin' in the Rain a chance. If you're a big musical lover and haven't watched this movie yet, go see it. If you're not a big musical lover, I think this is probably your best gateway into a musical, because most musicals are 2.5 to 3 hours. This one's under an hour, or under 2 hours, like an hour 40. That's very unheard of for a musical movie to go through. Right now, it is streaming on HBO Max. So if you guys want to have HBO Max subscription, I highly suggest checking this movie out. This is definitely a classic that is very enjoyable.
And I'll also stump for this, for a lot of these movies that hopefully you'll end up seeing through all of this. Like, if you don't have an HBO Max subscription, there are DVDs of it at your local library system. It is free. Like, that is one of the greatest resources we have in this country, is a free access to classic films.
That's why we have the Library Film Congress to do all this. So this is the reason to do it. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode, checking out a classic. I'd like to thank Steven. Hey, I thank you for joining this inaugural episode here. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to promote, talk about, have other listeners kind of check you out.
First, I feel like I might have been a good choice, but I might have also been a dangerous choice, because you've mentioned some of the other people you've got planned, and I'm worried how much more heightened and outlandish this series will get. Because I know at least one person will take the ball that I've tossed out and will run with it, and I am excited, I am scared. But for me, if you, for whatever reason, enjoyed my outlandish ramblings on this and references, I've popped up in a few things. I might pop up in some more things. We'll see how things go. But the main place you can find me is on Letterbox'd. Stevens Corner, STEVENSCORNER. It'll probably be in the link as well in the show notes. One of the things I'm hoping to do for 2023 is to watch. I've got a bunch of other, using the library and a bunch of DVDs and stuff I have, is watching a new movie with a different letter of the alphabet each week. So, like, hypothetically, I start the year with Arrival, and then I watch Blood Simple, and then, all the way down to, like, Zodiac, which is a movie I am disappointed I have not yet seen. And sometimes less classic movies, like, not necessarily Freddy Got Fingered, but that's a possibility. And I think now that I've put it out there, I feel like I've got to watch Freddy Got Fingered at some point.
You don't
But
need
just
to. It's okay.
yeah, but but the point being of like, or like some of the Freddy sequels, like
Yeah.
Dream Warrior or other stuff
Mhm.
there. But so I'm on Letterboxd. I'm on Instagram. I might be able to do some tie-ins with it and various things. That's Steven's Corner, same spelling, STEVENSCORNER, but with an underscore at the end. I'll have some stuff with that, and then I'll probably be in the comments or some of the other stuff, and maybe guesting later on a main feed episode. Who knows? But no, once again, thank you for having me. Thank you for doing this, and thank you for expanding the galaxy to allow people to enjoy classic films.
Oh no, thank you. When I was thinking about this project, there's only certain guest hosts that I wanted to ask because I want to start small. Hopefully, it gets a little bit bigger. So, Steven, I'm very grateful for you to join this and watching this movie. And hopefully, like I said, guys, this is the idea. Like I believe that going back through classic movies gives you a better appreciation of movies that come out now. So you kind of get the artwork, you kind of get the framework of where these directors, actors, writers kind of get their influence from. If you guys want to find me, I'm on Letterboxd mostly. I'm on Twitter too, but you can find me at Letterboxd at JNO11s, JNGO11. I will have my ranking list of the movies that I've watched in 2022 when this finally gets released. I can probably tell you that it is still a coin flip between Everything Everywhere All at Once and Tar. Like those are probably the two best movies. I mean, I know they're the two best movies I've seen this year. When we're recording this, I have yet to see Avatar and Babylon, so that might change my mind once this thing comes out. If it does, I will re-edit this real quickly at the end of it. You know what? Again, Steven, thank you for coming. Guys, thank you for listening. I hope you guys enjoy it. This is something that I'm going to do twice a month, so be on the lookout on our feed for it. Until then, check out Singin' in the Rain, you guys. Thank you.